Hey guys, what's going on? It's Gunnar here. Welcome back to the channel. It's the middle of March. Now, we've talked about a handful of things already here this spring that are very important when it comes to attracting, holding, and getting shots and killing big bucks. Now, one of the most important things, at least in my opinion, is going to be your screening aspect, whether that be screening a food plot, screening your approach to a tree stand, whatever it may be, or even just screening deer from each other, right? That's very important to my approach when I'm hunting. Now, there's various solutions to each of these different scenarios that you might be using screening in, but I want to go over a few of the different strategies and techniques that I use to screen my tree stand approach, deer from other deer, or my food plots in general. Now, first and foremost, you're going to be able to use a native grass blend, whether that be switchgrass, big blue stem, little blue stem, whatever grass planting you decide to put in the ground is going to work. I use a lot of switchgrass because it withstands a lot of the snowfall that we're going to get up here in Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa. A lot of those places that are going to get a decent amount of snowfall, I like to use a switchgrass because it's going to hold up and it's not going to snap off and lay down and kind of defeat the purpose of planting that because it is to screen. So I use a lot of switchgrass, but to double down on that, I'm not planting large acreage of switchgrass. Switchgrass is strictly my use for screening in these different situations. I'm not planting large monoculture blends of grasses that don't necessarily benefit outside of the cover aspect of it. If I have an area that's fairly substantial, upwards of half an acre and bigger, I'm not going to plant a monoculture grass planting in there because I'm kind of defeating the purpose of utilizing all the acreage that I can, especially on small properties. I want to utilize as much acreage as possible to double down on food and cover to keep deer on my property. I don't want to plant a big monoculture of switchgrass in a half-acre stand that isn't really producing much in the form of food value. I want to get as much bang for my buck. If I can plant a strip that's 8-10 feet wide and then plant some shrubs in there, then plant some fruit trees in there, and then put a food plot inside of that, I'm making the most of that half acre. Now, that food plot might not be a full half acre, but I have it screened adequately, and I have different varieties of food sources and nutrition available to those deer. So the grasses, a lot of people get over the top on, oh, I need to plant acres of grasses. No, plant what you need, whether that be an 8-10 foot strip that's doing its job. It is screening, because that switchgrass is going to get 6 to 8 feet tall, and it's going to adequately screen that area. So that's what I'm using switchgrass for. I'm not planting big swaths of wide open fields and switchgrass. I'm using it in strips. This strip along the fence line here, at the max it's 10 feet, and it's beautifully screening this inside corner food plot here from the rest of the field. And that's strictly to separate deer from deer, hide my approach into these tree stands. I got a box blind up here on the field that's separating these deer in the food plot from the deer in the ag field. And at the same time, it's screening my approach. It's providing that buffer. Deer feel secluded and safe back here because they can't see the big field. They don't feel wide open and exposed in here. And then once those deer transition into the ag fields towards dark, they're not feeling a bunch of social pressure when there's a lot of deer out there. There can be deer in here, there can be deer out there, and they would have no idea because they can't see it. Now, another option that you do have is more of a temporary type grass option, and that's going to be an Egyptian wheat. Now, I've used Egyptian wheat a handful of times, and I'm not a gigantic fan of it, strictly because it is an annual planting, and it sucks a lot of nitrogen. So the times that I've used it after that first year, if I want to repeat use it on that same area, I'm having to pour a lot of nitrogen to that crop to get it up to adequate height for screening. Now, it grows excellent. It does a really good job of what it's supposed to in screening, but I'm more of a proponent of planting something more long-term. Take the 2 to 3 years to get that switchgrass or that big blue stem or that little blue stem established and get a good crop in there. Now you're not having to consistently every single year go and replant that, and you're not spending a bunch of money on fertilizer, and you're not burning out the soil that eventually you are going to plant a more long-term option into. So that's what I kind of lean to. Like I said, if you do need that instant screening, Egyptian wheat works excellently. But on the more long-term side of things, I really like conifers. We plant a lot of Norway spruce for our screen trees. I've got an area kind of along the property line that's a little bit exposed as far as the neighboring property and the neighbors creating some disturbance over there. So I went ahead and last spring I went in and I planted a bunch of Norway spruce in there, and I separated them about 8 to 12 feet. And now that's not going to provide that immediate cover and that immediate screen, but I'm not necessarily looking for that in that location. I just want a long-term screen eventually coming there, so I can do more with the property, more with the field, and separate things a little bit more. And that's just a long-term me thinking ahead. But for example, you could use these screens together, right? You could plant a buffer of switchgrass, and then you could plant your more long-term strategy with those conifers and just wait. Use that switchgrass as a right now fix or a 2 to 3 years fix. And then once that long-term conifer screen comes up, you're set. You're good to go for many, many years. I really like to use those pine trees in more disruptive areas, especially if there's maybe some traffic, some car traffic, ATV traffic, some of those areas that are a little bit more prone to human activity or loud travel noises from a four-wheeler, a car, whatever it is. I like to use those big conifer screens in areas like that where switchgrass is going to screen it to an extent, but you're only getting that 6 to 8 foot range. If you can get that 15, 20 foot range of thick wall of a conifer there, that's going to really exponentially make those deer feel more secure, especially if something's just driving right by. They're not going to get as freaked out if they can't physically see it. They can hear something a little bit, but they're not feeling like they're within eyesight of whatever that is, a vehicle, ATV, what have you. So those pines are really good for high disturbance areas and that long-term play as far as screening for the future. They're also really good stand locations. So if you do have a nice fence line like this, I'll probably stick a couple pine trees in here this spring when they roll in. But they're really nice stand locations, and especially on this thin fence line, get some of those pine trees coming up as a backdrop. Really tuck a stand location in nicely, and you'll never get busted as long as you do your part. And now another option, and this kind of all stacks together. You can plant all of this stuff. It's going to be shrubbery. You can plant shrubbery like dogwoods in here, some blackberry briars. You can get all of this stuff working together, right? Your dogwoods are going to get, you know, as high as the deer are going to allow them, right? Because deer love those things. I like to tube mine. I've got 2.5 foot tubes on all of my dogwoods. So basically the way I'm picturing that is those dogwoods are going to get right up to here, and then they're going to start growing out because the deer are going to browse them at this height, and they're going to start growing outwards and spreading that way. So I have 2.5 feet, and then some of your blackberry briars are going to get 3 to maybe 5 feet tall. So you've got 3 to 5 feet real thick. Now you've got your switchgrass at that 6 to 8 foot. So you've got all of your undergrowth covered. And then your long-term play, your canopy trees could be, you could plant some apples in there as well. But as far as screening, you go with those conifers, going anywhere from 15 to as high as you want for your canopy cover as well. So I really like all of these in conjunction with each other. For instance, right now, I've got the switchgrass, I've got the dogwoods in here, and like I said, I'm putting fruit trees in here, and then long-term play would be those conifers in here. So stacking all of this stuff together to really just create a sharp break here where this food plot is isolated completely and these deer don't feel any pressure whatsoever, and that's really going to exponentially improve the daytime activity on these plots. And now, the last but definitely not least, but I think the most overlooked form of screening cover is going to be topography. Now, that can be natural topography, or that could be a guy on a bulldozer creating a big berm of dirt, you know, on the backside of your food plot, completely screening whatever might be on the other side. But the way I'm going to explain this is this area that I'm standing in right now, the entire hill is flat up on top. It rolls back, and its lowest point is right here before it drops off on the steep bluff. Now, the reasoning that this is considered cover is because anything that's above that tipping point, the highest point on this hill, cannot be seen. Anything behind that cannot be seen. So we're already screening the entire back side of this field. We're looking at a distance that you can see of maybe 100 yards here from where I'm standing. Now, if you flattened all of this out, you immediately change that distance that I can see to a mile. So from a deer's perspective, if they can only see 150 yards versus a mile, I think they're going to choose 150 yards. At least from my experience, that's what they choose. They like to stay hidden. They like to find those little hideouts where they can't necessarily see a long ways. They're very sneaky. They're using that edge cover, but at the same time, they're using the areas that are the least amount of disturbance. So I've seen guys bring a bulldozer in, create big 6-8 foot tall berms, and that's their screen of just dirt for their food plots. But you're gonna find those natural areas too where you're gonna get a hog back roll. They're gonna wanna be there over an area that's very visual to, you know, whatever disturbance, a house, a main road. They're gonna wanna be in the area that you can't really see them versus an area that you can see them very easily. So take that into account, use that natural topography, and if you have to, get your hands dirty and get somebody in here with a bulldozer and create those berms. And you can always seed whatever else you want on top of that. Say you create a 6-8 foot tall berm and you throw some switchgrass on that. Now that berm is 14 feet, right? 16 feet, whatever it is. You've doubled the size of that just by planting something valuable on top of that. So use a couple of these different things. Figure out what works for you in the different situations. Don't go over the top on all those native grass plantings. Use it in strips because that's all you really need. Like I said, that switchgrass, if you plant it correctly and maintain it correctly, it's very thick. It's extremely thick. You can't see through it. You don't need more than 8-10 feet, 12 at the max, and you're going to have an adequate screen. Utilize some of these things in conjunction with each other. Plan for the long term. Don't bank on just that yearly Egyptian wheat, because eventually you're going to pay the price for that, and you're going to burn out your soil. You're going to pay more in seed every single year. You're going to pay more in fertilizer cost every single year, and you're always going to have that maintenance aspect of things, going back and tilling that up and reseeding every single year. And at the same time, on those drought years, you might have a crop, you might not. So I like to bank on getting something in the ground, getting something more permanent, maintaining it. Like the switchgrass, I burn that stuff off every 3 to 4 years. Here it's a really easy burn. I've got a wide open ag field here behind me. In the springtime when that's wet, when I've got green rye planted in there, that's a burn break. When I've got my field road here, planted in just a DNR road mix that's green or it's a little bit muddy, that's another burn break. Get the right wind and we're good to go there. So very little maintenance on the switchgrass stuff, but utilize some of these different things. If I'm going to give you one big time tip, is tube your trees or fence your trees. If you guys are going to be planting some conifer trees, fence those things in. Get yourself some of that chicken wire or whatever you guys got, and put a couple fence posts on either side, because those bucks are going to tear them up when they get 2 to 3 feet tall. The rabbits will chew a ring around them. So protect those things. You don't want to have to keep going in and replanting after you've done it once and wasting those years of screen. If you're going to do it right the first time. And at the same time, I like to water them if it's a dry year, just in case. These trees are usually pretty hardy. If you plant them correctly, they can withstand quite a bit. But I've done a lot of watering over the last couple of years. It's been pretty dry in the summer here in Wisconsin. I've watered a lot of my fruit trees, watered some of my conifers as well, just to keep them healthy and keep them growing, going the right directions. So like I said, use some of these things. If you guys have any questions, shoot me a text, 608-632-7233. If you guys got a turkey tag this spring, I wish you the best of luck. We're gonna keep kicking out these habitat videos. The preparation continues for fall, so have a good one.